Добрый день, дамы и господа, коллеги. Разрешите, я немножко вам расскажу про инвестиционный климат и инвестиционные возможности Волгоградской области. Кратенько дам характеристику региона. В принципе, многие знают Волгоградскую область, слышали. Регион занимает достаточно удачное географическое положение. Через него проходит несколько пересечений транспортных коридоров север-юг.
Transsib, Euro-Asian corridor, and for the Volgograd companies, one of the traditional type of operations has become the supply of equipment and other goods to Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and it all has been shipped via Volgograd. We do trade and we have certain relationship with Azerbaijan, Iran. We are located by Kazakhstan, so we have very close connections with those countries. And via the Rostov region, we also can communicate with the Ukraine. We've got quite a huge potential of consumer demands within the radius of 700 kilometers. Within this radius, we've got over 30 million people. Volgograd occupies quite a serious position both in regards to the economy, but I think it would not be correct to say that we have a perfect economical situation in the region. For example, after the crisis, we had several problems, and they still keep affecting the situation in the region. But still, it's one of the most significant regions of the country. It's one of the regions which have 1 million population cities. One of the unique features of the region is that it is relatively warm climate compared to the rest of Russia. It's not Sochi, of course, but it's still very closer to Sochi than Moscow. And given this, I think there are several reasons for the development of agriculture, tourism, based on the climatic conditions. Here you can see the list of major factors, or rather arguments, in favor of the investment in the region. But I think, well, most of the regions have similar advantages, of course, to be fair. And each region has its own peculiarities. Volgograd is relatively dense in terms of population. In the Southern Federal District, it's got one of the leading positions in terms of population. Volgograd also has a very developed transport infrastructure. We've got an airport, river ports in Volsk and Commission. It allows us to transport cement and different kinds of crops. We've got a very powerful transport junction, which is going to be developed further on. We're going to come up with an industrial park, which is going to become a significant logistics area, logistical junction. And I can assure you that Volgograd is a huge industrial transport junction. Well, actually, I've already said that we occupy quite a convenient position compared to the rest of the districts. Well, for example, with Iran, we also have a relationship, and we provide them with crops. Actually, we have a certain history of success, of course, in the sphere of investment, because the companies you see on this slide, they operate actively in the region. Coca-Cola, Barrel Tobacco, and the others, they have placed their facilities in our region. Volgograd deals very actively with major Russian companies such as Russian Railways and Lukoil. Lukoil is one of the oldest partners of the Volgograd region. We've got the largest refinery in the south of Russia in the region. Now we are rolling out a large program in cooperation with Russian Railways, and a bit later I'm going to talk to you about the Eurokim project. In Volgograd we've got large reserves of different kinds of minerals, and there are wells and fields which would be profitable, I guess, and they could be used together with certain production facilities, for example, for the production of cement or for the production of greenhouses, for example. We have a very interesting transport network for the transportation of oil products. A pipeline is going to be built in the Volgograd region. Actually, we already have several pipelines. Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Quite a lot of attention is paid towards the preparation and support of investment areas, investment sites. You can see that there is a significant number of them. They are ready to welcome new investors. They've got decent capacity, and they are very conveniently located, very close to the transport lines, such as railroads and traditional roads. And we're also paying a lot of attention towards the formation of two parks, industrial parks. We've got the plots of land. Now we are dealing with the communication development in those parks. One of them is going to be close to the airport, the other one not too far either. Volgograd has got a very serious potential in terms of human resources as well and scientific resources. We have 51 higher education institutions. One of them is the Volgograd Medical University, and its graduates, there is a very high demand for the graduates of that university, the pharmacists, different kinds of doctors, and actually we have a very serious scientific base in regards to the pharmaceutics development. And I guess we also got some lobbying potential for the implementation of certain medical substances or drugs. And the rector of the university is a member of the council, which defines the list of the drugs which can be used within the territory of the Russian Federation. So I guess the level of our influence is pretty clear from that. As for the mechanisms of support, I'm going to get into a bit more detail here. In this slide, it's a very basic picture of blocks into which our investment improvement environment program is divided. We have quite a large and well-developed investment base. For example, we have a law about private-public partnerships and about the support of investment, and in compliance with that law, the investors who come to our region get tax remissions and tax benefits, and the law has been enforced a few times. The practice of application of this law is pretty much transparent, and the investor draws up his application, the ministry reviews it, and In general, if the project is serious, well, actually most of the projects have been approved and have been cleared for further implementation. As far as I remember, of the last few years, there hasn't been a single case when a project got rejected. I would also like to say that in our region we developed the program of improvements of the business environment, which is targeted at the concentration of business community and at structuralization of the business community, so that it would be simpler to get and to send information, so that entrepreneurs and businessmen could exchange data, and so that they could choose from the list of services or partners. And by that I mean consulting, audit, partnership services. It's quite a serious program. We very closely assessed the positive experience of Yekaterinburg and Voronezh, and we are going to implement their experience on the soil of the Volgograd region. And I think this project is going to be an indispensable part of the investment climate improvements in general. Because the investors can provide different functions, of course, and can perform different functions. They can set up certain canteens or for the workforce, or they could set up certain facilities. And another type of cooperation is the participation in supply tenders for large companies. And this is going to be another outcome of this program. Currently, we have two types of tax exemptions. As for the property tax, in the Volgograd region, it's a pretty unique experience for the whole country, because the investors get a zero tax rate for the property tax, while in Krasnodar, for example, only 50% of the tax is exempt. So these are, on the slide you can see two types of major tax exemptions we provide our investors with. The practice of these tax exemptions application has already been well developed and it's been applied, so we didn't have any problem with that. Apart from these tax remissions, we also have other measures targeted at the investment climate improvement. We allocate certain amounts of money into infrastructure development. This is a budget investment. And we decided to direct those investments into the industrial segment so far. So basically plots of land given to the investors are going to be given in the framework of this particular budget allocation. I would also like to say a few words about the mechanisms of risk reduction and risk management. There are several problems regarding corruption, bureaucracy, as always is in our country, and they quite bother the investors. And I think the list of the instruments on this slide are going to improve the investment environment in this sphere. Some of them have already been applied, some of them are going to be implemented soon, some of them are being developed. As for the single window principle, I guess everyone understands what that is. As for collective investment, it's one of the forms which is going to allow the investors to unite the investments both from the inside of the region and the investments coming from outside. For example, when an investor has got 20 million rubles and an investor has got it at the bank account, this money could work more efficiently, but they have to be managed. So we're going to recommend our investors to create certain funds which are going to be under a unite command of a certain body, and they're going to be accumulated and used for better purposes. Another major tool is the implementation of projects based on partnerships. I guess not only in our region we've got this corporation of the development of the Volgograd Oblast, and 100% of these shares belong to the region administration, so we are ready to implement certain projects on partnership conditions. So we are ready to assist the investors in their search for land, for resources. Of course, our participation share is not going to be significant. It's only going to be 5 or 10%, but the investors have to see that there is a partnership between us, and when a project reaches a certain stage, after the investment stage, for example, we could say that property share belonging to the administration is going to be bought out by the investor, of course, if he wants to. Because you know that major risks for the investors is the investment stage itself. Specifically in Russia, given our bureaucratic mechanisms, we suggest that we go through that phase together. We pick an area, we do the communications setting, we have built a company, we have commissioned the plant, we have started production process, and after that, the administration is ready to sell its share to the investor, because it's not our purpose to earn money. It's our purpose to help an investor to do that. Because you know that when a state participates in a certain project, an official at every level is going to treat it in a different way. But we suggest another structure of relationships. So basically, this is our participation is purely symbolic. Well, let's say that this is a temporary measure, but still this is a very needful instrument, and we're ready to work in accordance with it. As for the industrial parks, I'm not going to tell you much about that. I guess you all understand what that is. I just can say that we are not the first to do that kind of thing. But this instrument also diminishes the risks. But I would like to say a few words about the state programs. An example of such program is a Eurochem project. The scale of this project amounts to over 80 billion rubles, and plus, so basically this is 80 billion of private money and 2 billion of state money, 2 billion rubles of state money used for the construction of the engineering network, further used for the construction of residences. 2 billion for our budget is quite a sum, so this is not going to be spent in a single day. The project is going to last for several years, but this is a practice we are applying right now, and we are ready to develop it further on. And even if the projects are smaller, say not 80 billion but 100 million rubles, because there are there can be small projects, niche specific and specific sphere related, in which we are also able to participate and with which we can provide some assistance. For example, the projects targeted at certain social and economic priority objectives we have in our region. Another mechanism is so-called PPP, or private-public partnership. We have an example of this kind of partnership, the project which is called Management of Waste. I guess I don't have to tell the Russians what waste is for Russia. and what a dump is for Russia and how it's criminalized to a great extent. And a private investor is going to find it hard to implement any project in this sphere. Well, the sum of the project we are handling amounts to... Actually, it's the first project in Russia of this kind. So basically, in some issues, we are the pioneers. So, getting back to the sum of the project, the first stage amounted to 1.2 billion rubles. The second stage required 1 billion rubles. So we are not only dealing here with the storage of waste and garbage, we deal more with the further processing of it. So the first stage was to create a concession and to create some other mechanisms which would allow us to lower the risks for the investors in such spheres as healthcare industry sphere. So basically the spheres which require serious government management and where we have observed certain examples of incorrect work of the state bodies. And of course, the last instrument is the consultancy services provided by our administration, because we see ourselves as consultants. So you can contact us and ask for our recommendations in regards to what projects we would recommend for you. We can give you some advice on what sphere you can enter, what market you can enter, what kind of business model could be applicable there, what partners you could choose. So the choice is yours. We can only consult you here and give you some recommendations. And we have also come up with this accreditation mechanism, which allows certain companies such as HR agencies or realtor agencies to get specific conditions of cooperation. The administration is going to approve their status. It's going to make clear that these are not some criminals and they could be let into our region. So basically this mechanism has been created in order to simplify the entering of an investor into our region. So we are going to recommend you the spheres which could be the priorities for both for our region and for you. So basically now we have 4 major spheres that are the priority ones for us. On some of them we have started working. I could give you lots of details about each activity here. Say chemistry and pharmaceutics. We have a very serious, large number of chemical enterprises which allow us to manufacture lots of different substances. And for example, in Volgograd we have a company that owns a very wide range of different equipment, and it's been given an order to try to develop a substance which could lower the symptoms of HIV. I guess you understand that this is quite an innovative step for this company, and they have to have a very serious scientific base in order to try to create that kind of a drug. So there are lots of such companies in our city and in our region. They have not exactly been synchronized with our market because each one of them has got a different background, but you can still use their capacity. Why we picked these particular types of activities is because the development of them has been historically predetermined. And by these activities, I mean agricultural segment, chemistry and pharmaceutics, tourism, and refinery, oil refinery. So basically, these are the priority ones for us, and they have been predetermined by our HR potential, by the costs. We have a huge HR potential here. And also because we have inherited a certain legacy in terms of industrial sites and facilities back from the Soviet Union. For example, in the agricultural segment, traditionally from the Soviet time, there's been widely spread a system, a wide system of seed production stations, and it just has to be upgraded and contrived into the whole system. Because these enterprises, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, they became, well, somewhat unobserved. But lately we had this exhibition in Moscow, and we managed to come up with certain rare types of animals and crops and seeds. In particular, the rice that grows in the Volgograd region requires 3 times smaller amount of water than the other types of rice. So we are going to make you familiar with all kinds of innovative things we developed back in Volgograd, and we are going to assist you in the building of a profitable business, of course. Well, I guess I have to say a few more words about the fact that we are perfectly open and transparent, and we are ready to provide any information to our investors in regards to the stability of political situation. Volgograd region has not been exactly lucky over the last few years because our administration members did not have the reserves that it needed, or rather the reserves were not applied. And there were several internal conflicts between the region and the federation. Plus, the level of professionalism left much to be desired in a number of cases. So basically we had unqualified management and administration. But currently the administration is headed by a very good professional who's got great relationships with the president of the Russian Federation. And in fact, they even discussed the issue of inclusion of the Volgograd city into the list of the cities who could host the soccer championship of 2018. I guess that's a good indication, and this is a symptom of those changes and reforms that should come to our region. And I also understand that in our country the economic situation is very sporadic, and it's divided into certain so-called families, or rather trees. So you have to understand first who owns this or that enterprise and who owns these or those assets in order to start a relationship with this or that facility or business. So we can say that we are transparent, and we are ready to provide you any kind of consultancy, and we are ready to participate in data exchange. So I guess I'm done here. You can put down my contact details, and you can ask your questions, of course, and I'm ready to answer some of them here. If there are no questions, thank you for... Okay. I'm from the Russian Economic University of Plekhanov. Could you please tell us how exactly the targeted residential housing program, the federal residential housing program, works in your region? So is the regional money spent or the federal money, and how exactly the mechanism of private investment funding works? That's what I'm interested in. Well, I could say that residential housing program is not very close to the list of issues I deal with, because the money invested into greenfield projects, that's what I work with actually. But as far as I know, this year in the Volgograd region, there have been built 2 new residential housing complexes, and there has been started the construction of health resort complex, and we are trying to consider the interests of private investors here. But as far as I know, the region tries to spend a certain amount of money onto the infrastructure when it has the opportunity, but we are limited in terms of our administrative resource. And sometimes we have different types of conflicts. For example, when a power company bill us for 200,000 rubles or even 200 millions, but then we get experts from the administration involved, and suddenly the bill gets down to, say, 170 million. We have an understanding at our ministry that the rented residential housing should be developed as well, and one of our major companies has been dealing with it, though it's bankrupt right now. And with adequate participant, with an adequate strategic unit, we could reanimate that program to revise it probably, and we could create some foundation or some fund for the rent housing. So that's the main issue. And we also try to prevent not grounded speculative processes in the market of housing, because we assessed the pricing mechanism back in 2008, 2009, and we understood that back then speculative capital was the driver. And if there was a program for rent housing building, a large-scale program, I mean, that would not allow the developers to raise their prices for housing to that high an extent. Right now the prices went down a bit, but still it's not enough for an average citizen to buy an apartment. And once again, about the housing, I could say that we participate in a number of state programs, and together with them we allocate plots of land, and we organize tenders for them. We sold one of such plots, and it has been actively developed. And here our priority is strategic planning. Because, for example, in the context of the Moscow agglomeration development, we need to come up with a certain vision of the Volgograd agglomeration development. And we need to find solutions for transport problems, traffic jam problems, because you see our city is very picturesque and interesting, but it has a specific feature: it's very long and narrow. And our satellite city Volsk is pretty large as well. And it all complicates the development of a concept which we are trying to come up with. The concept that would allow us to form new districts of the city that could be located in a better in better territories from the point of view of ecology, and so that we could provide these regions and districts with certain production facilities. So we don't want our people, our citizens, to commute at large distances like they do it in Moscow. And these concepts would also allow us to relieve some tension, probably tension and pressure which our state roads, our main roads bear. So that, I think, is our priority task. And we're looking for every single opportunity to get a certain amount of investment out of budget. Good evening. I'm from the Moscow Industrial Bank. My name is Volodskaya Olga. My issue is partially related to the residential housing and other issues you were talking about. You said about the construction of new districts in ecologically clean districts. But sometimes certain regions face the problem of the lack of population. So do you have enough people in order to inhabit those new districts, new houses? Yes, I know what you're talking about. We have this tendency, and the most qualified, the most skillful citizens leave Volgograd. Yes, we also have this trend, but I couldn't say this is a global problem. It's not like huge masses of people leave the city, but it's still connected to what I was talking about in regards to the business environment. It's not only our regular citizens who left, but also businessmen owning small and medium enterprises also left the region. But that's exactly why we're trying to develop and improve our business environment. What you just said about the fleeing of people from regions, we consider that, and we will develop our project in compliance with that consideration. And over the last 5 or 6 years, Volgograd has been occupying one of the leading positions in regards to the subsidies allocated to our businessmen so that they could organize their startups and stay in our region. I mean, we do have to admit the problem of people leaving the regions, but we don't have to be afraid of it. We just have to confront it and to consider it when developing our projects. And you have to believe me when I say that the system of state function performing is changing significantly. And I guess this is a good start for us, a good starting point in order to create a better climate for the forming of new businesses and for the investors. And when an investor worries about the human resources, when he worries that he won't be able to hire enough people, I could say that this kind of worries doesn't make any sense. Drop people and you won't have any complications when you start hiring for a new company. Moreover, this process has been structurized, and the process of people leaving the city is also structurized. I mean, we know from where people leave and where they stay, and we understand where we better build something. So we have considered this problem, and I think we need to develop partially, in order to resolve this problem, we also have to develop the program I was talking about, the program of rent residential housing. Actually, a major problem I would like to draw your attention to is the risk management, because the investment program has to be assessed from every possible side and from every possible perspective. Because when you build residential housing, you have to also to plan ahead for the kindergartens, hospitals, all kinds of infrastructure. So a complex approach needed here. Not just because it's our social function, but because the rule of economics is that when a person is satisfied with the environment, he might have lower requirements for payment. I mean, if a person is good with what he has, with what apartment he has and what environment he has, it's healthy, then he is good with his payment. Distinguished colleagues, any more questions? Oh, yeah, I'm ready to answer your questions during the break. Thank you for your attention.